What's going on, guys? And thanks for tuning in. It's Thursday evening out here in the fighting town of Flint, Michigan. I'm fired up, man. It's USMNT talk tonight. I can't get enough of this stuff, man. But joining me tonight is Adam Turner. It's been a while, man. How's it going with you?
It's great, man. It's great. Just living life, coaching some kids in basketball, and getting fired up for some USMNT. Feel like the January camp doesn't give us much. I actually didn't track it this year for the first time in a long time. I just kind of opted out with everything going on in my life, and feels like it's been 5 months since we've really dialed into the A team USMNT. Long time since we've seen Potch really coach these guys. So I couldn't be more jacked up to see what it looks like. And this is it. This is the tune up for the summer, and the summer is the tune up for the World Cup. So we're here, man.
Well, I will say this, and of course, if you guys are tuning in, hit the like and subscribe buttons. As apparently, we're just going to dive into this because you just brought up something that I think we're going to have to talk about real quick. But the January camp, I got to say, man, I actually rather enjoyed the January camp. It was the first opportunity for a lot of MLS-based guys to really get their first opportunity under Pochettino, and so you had guys going hard, and for me, it was a different vibe and a different feel versus January camps under Greg Berhalter. It seemed a little bit more relaxed under Greg, but for Poch, it just had a different feel. It seemed like guys were maybe sprinting a little harder and hustling. Just giving that little extra 10%. And I thought a couple of guys really stood out. I thought Diego Luna really stood out. Matter of fact, Diego Luna got his nose busted and he stayed in the game instead of coming out. And I don't know, man, that just got me fired up because it's been a long time since we saw a dude wearing the U.S. crest that was willing to get down and dirty. I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wish I could comment on it and have a combo with it. But it was it was one of those things where the last couple of years I've been so dialed into January camp. And and I listen, for all of us who follow it year round, I encourage anyone, if there's a low stakes time where you can say, you know what, I'm going to back off, because it's just, we get to a point.
I hear you.
We get to a point with fandom, right, where you can go, if me for sure, just go overboard, right? So it's kind of not I feel refreshed. I'll be honest. I feel refreshed. If you go back to we could go back, Steve, to COVID, and it's just been constant. At least with me, I have followed day in, day out, right? What are they doing with their clubs? What are they doing? Who's moving where? What's going? And it's year round. And it's been a really nice reset for me where I've kind of dialed back into club games, Champions League, MLS starting back up. And I've started to just kind of get back into it. But I'll be honest, January, I kind of was you know what? I'm going to step away, and I'm going to come back in February and March totally refreshed and ready to hit the ground running. And that's kind of what it feels like right now, and just super,
I hear you.
Super exciting. I mean, you have, around the world, you have, championships being fought for right now, club season. You've got Nations League, and, this summer you've got some awesome international competitions.
Yep.
And it's an awesome time to be a fan right now. So I'm jacked up.
Yeah, I will say this. From a competition standpoint, the January camp was a big letdown. You're playing Venezuela and Costa Rica. Even with your C teams, you're gonna dust either of those nations. All disrespect to Venezuela. I totally understand where you're coming from, because now you kind of transition, and this is really the first opportunity with Nations League to see essentially what is going to be the core of what we probably will see in 2026. So you're going to finally see Gio Reyna being coached by, in Pochettino's system. And you're going to see really the nuts and bolts of what should be coming down the pipe in 2026. That's what I'm fired about this one, this Nations League roster. I mean, the 23-man has not been announced yet, but I would probably assume you're going to see, the nuts and bolts of what we're going to see in 2026.
For sure. Or at least the start. And that's the other exciting thing, is starting to think about who Poch likes, right? Based on he's now had 6 months ish at the helm to see guys up close and personal, to see guys for club. And you really are going to start to get a sneak peek at where his preferences actually lie.
Yeah. Well, as the header says, are the U.S. men's national team dark horses for the 2026 World Cup? And it's a very nuanced question because there's a lot of context and there's a lot of intrigue surrounding this one because obviously, we're one of the three host nations, and so the U.S. men's national team are going to get a taste of what it was, like for the team of the '94 cycle. Being able to experience this awesome tournament on U.S. soil. And if you're going off of FIFA rankings, I'm sure a lot of people would be like, no, there's 15 to 18 better teams, that are deeper, that are stronger, that probably have more pound for pound talent than the U.S. men's national team. But I don't think it's just as simple as yes or no. I think there's a lot of more nuance to this one. And I want to start off with you, Adam, and just get a feel for how you think this not necessarily is going to play out, but what do you think about this team right now being a year off and heading into this massive tournament?
I think a good way, I think the FIFA rankings are flawed, right? But I think a good way to kind of think about it is if you look at the FIFA rankings, it certainly tells a story. It doesn't tell the whole story. It certainly doesn't paint any sort of clear pictures, but on a high level, when you look at the FIFA top 10, right? Argentina, France, Spain, England, Brazil, Portugal, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Germany, not much you wouldn't expect there, right? I mean, if I asked you for the 10 best soccer nations, you probably come pretty close to those 10. So like those are the big boys, right? When you really think like who has a high percentage chance to win it, you think about those guys, right? Then I think there's a second tier down, which, listen, some of these nations fade in, fade out in terms of relevance.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you look over to the last 30 years, Uruguay, Colombia, Croatia, you can even go down to, some of the African nations that have made runs, right? There's always one or two African nations that are, ready to kind of make a run to the quarters, semis. But those teams probably are a bit less likely to actually win it all. But they're serious threats to make semifinal runs. There's another kind of group, I would say a group of like 5 to 6 nations that consistently are like ready to make a run to the, Final Four, right? Or maybe even the World Cup final. Then you have this other group typically, right? And that group to me is really in flux. We've seen Costa Rica, right, make a deeper run in the World Cup, randomly, right? You could go through,
right.
Every World Cup, there's a random team. Though that's who we are going to be, right? We're not going to be a perennial world power yet. We're not even going to be that second tier power who's like right there. We are going to be the team that is the actual definition of the dark horse, right? Which it's like, who outside of the top 15 nations is poised to, potentially make a splash? Why not us? That's my question. Why not us? We're at home, which if you look over the last 30 years, that has been a absolute, demarcation point for a team that's a dark horse. Going back to, the run that South Korea made in 2000.
Yep. In 2000, well, look at the U.S. in '94, a team that was not even predicted to get out of their group, and they piggybacked the home crowd environment to get that upset over Colombia that vaulted them into the group stages. 100%.
Overachieved like crazy, right? Russia overachieved in 2018, right? Like it, we've now seen that like playing at home lifts a team. If a team has like a decent talent base, decent coaching, and they're at home and motivated, it certainly is an indicator of a team that can make a run. So we've got that on our side. The other thing we have on our side is we have an entire group of guys that I think, if you look back at the last World Cup, certainly fair to call them a young team. Not the case anymore. Yeah. Not the case. All of our guys are going into their prime. Most of our guys are now playing, a high percentage of them are playing key minutes for pretty big clubs that are playing really important matches. Now is Juventus where Juventus was 6-7 years ago? No. Is Milan where Milan was a decade ago? No. But like they're still playing big time matches. Like don't get it twisted that like the importance of the AC Milan matches, the Milan derby, those matches are big time. And we have a bunch of guys, not just there, right? But in England, we have, Jedi at Fulham. And even like the Celtic center backs, like those guys are playing important matches this year And that's what's really cool to me is you have a lot of guys coming into their prime. And I think the big worry for a lot of us, Steve, was like, are they going to be playing? Just based on like 2-3 years ago, we had a bunch of guys not playing. And it's really cool to look across. Now, there's some injury stuff we can talk about, but for the most part,
we're going to get into that, by the way. I'm going to start off with the second cycle, right? This whole second cycle theory. And when you look back at World Cup winners, and generally when they win the World Cup, it's on their second cycle. Very rare do we see a third cycle or even a fourth cycle winner. I mean, Argentina, when they just won it, that was more of a veteran team, not necessarily as young as when Argentina won in '86 with Maradona, right? That's like the rarity. Most of them usually excel in that second cycle, and it's because they had that first taste. And I always go back to Belgium in 2010 to 2014 when they had a young Kevin De Bruyne, they had a young Romelu Lukaku that did not know how to compete at this tournament. They came back in 2014 with a top world-class head coach, and they were able to navigate the waters of what it is to be in a World Cup and be able to win, not just in the group stage, but also to be able to navigate the knockout rounds as well too. And when you look at it, there's a lot of second cycle winners, or at least teams that made deep runs. And there's so many parallels between this U.S. men's national team and that Belgium team, considering that our top players are playing at top clubs around the world. You look at Anthony Robinson, who's probably the best left back in the Premier League right now, if not the best. He's top 2. You know what I mean? He's now he's in a situation where he has other top clubs that actually want his services. You mentioned Christian Pulisic. I mean, Captain America is playing for AC Milan. Weston McKennie wore the armband at Juventus. He wore the armband. Like that has never happened for a U.S. player, playing in Serie A to ever be graced with a historic club like Juventus wearing the armband. So the evolution of this team from the 2022 cycle, where they were getting their first taste of the World Cup, and understanding what it's like to compete at the World Cup, being on the bright, being under the bright lights, being on that big stage, and I think coming into this tournament with the added advantage of having the home, I think this could be a situation where we potentially get past where we were in 2002 when we got Mexico.
Yeah, I think, the other thing that you have to, it matters, right? It's one of the reasons I think home teams have success is you're automatically put in that, pot 1 for the draw, right?
Yeah.
Which matters, right? Like, so all of a sudden, South Africa's hosting the World Cup and they're being treated like they're Argentina in terms of the pot, right? That matters because you are now all of a sudden elevated to this top tier where your second team is now going to be theoretically a second tier team, right? And then your third team. So you're bypassing. If you are in the position like we are, where we'd probably be pot 2 or pot 3, right? Just depending on how it comes out. You don't have to have a Germany in your group. You don't have to have Argentina in your group. You don't have to have Brazil in your group, Portugal in your group, like we did in 20, right? You all of a sudden get yourselves, and then you get an Uruguay. And certainly, as we saw, last summer, you're not walking over Uruguay, but at least you get Uruguay, and then you get a third tier, right? And a fourth tier, right? And it doesn't mean the World Cup's easy or the group is easy. It's not, but it's drastically easier, right? I think we can say that fairly. And that's important, right? All of a sudden you're pot 1. Hopefully you can get a more manageable group, because getting out of the group, potentially being able to win your group, if you can work that out, can have a massive advantage with who you play in the round of 16, right? And then from there, it becomes a little bit of luck, right? Luck of the draw in terms of, what your path is. You can get, England's path in 2018, which is a lot easier than a lot of other paths, that the teams have to go down.
And then you also add in the expanded field this cycle, right? So winning the group definitely plays a huge advantage into it because you're going to get third place winners out of other groups, which is going to have a huge advantage. I look at this and I look at the history of second cycles, and when you go down the list, when you look at France in 2018, that was a second cycle winner. Germany in 2014 was a second cycle winner. Spain in 2010, Brazil in 2002, West Germany in 1990, and Argentina in 86. I mean, there's a who's who littered of second cycle winners. And I also think that the extra added advantage of Mauricio Pochettino is going to play a huge role into this, because if there's anybody who knows how to make sure that these guys stay calm and loose, who understands what it's like to play in big games. I mean, he's coached in a lot of big finals. I don't know, man. I just think everything is going to be able to come together for this team. Now, I'm not suggesting that the U.S. is going to win this thing. I don't think they have that type of talent where they can do it. But that being said, but to potentially equal or potentially better what we did in 2002, it certainly seems plausible.
Yeah,
just considering the talent.
To me, that's the benchmark. It's like semifinals is the benchmark. Semifinals, if I'm just being realistic, semifinals is the World Cup win to me. It's like you make a semifinal, you get further than you've ever gotten, right, in the modern era. Like it absolutely opens the door to like a whole new world, right? How big that game would be here. And just being honest, as you know, in any sort of, I'm a March Madness guy, right? And like in any sort of knockout competition, if you make a game a one-off, if it's not a home and home, if it's not a 7-game series like, our American sports, if it's not a 38-game season, right? Like a European soccer season, anything can happen. You don't have to be the best side. You just have to figure out a way to eke out a win that day. I think I just saw the stats from like I think it was Liverpool's match maybe last weekend, and they won 1-0, and they had two shots on goal. It might have been the Champions League game a couple of days ago. And whoever they played, I'll pull it up. No, I'm blanking on it. Had 27 shots and 10 on. It was like that's soccer. Like that is soccer, man. Like you can absolutely find a way to win if you're well organized and you get some breaks on a day. And once you get to the semis, you just have to have that happen twice. Anything can happen,
or once.
Well, to win it, sorry, but like you just need to do it in the semis, and you will need to absolutely pull some stuff out of your ass in the semis and finals. There's no doubt. Like we're not going into the semis, and I don't have expectation to go into the semis and finals with this team and Poch and like go outplay France.
No.
It's not happening. We got to like organize and play the absolute scrappiest game and pull out that France game somehow, and then do the same, and probably in PKs, right? In one or two of them. But that's the beauty of soccer. I will say this, just so everybody listening understands where my expectations are. Winning a World Cup would be the absolute biggest upset I've seen as an American sports fan. Probably
bigger. I would probably say the U.S. winning the World Cup would be bigger than the Miracle on Ice in 1980.
I was going to say that. I think it's bigger than the Miracle on Ice. I think it's equal to Leicester winning the Premier League in whatever that was, 2016, 15. 16, right? Yeah. Pretty similar, honestly. Like that level of dark horse. Like, and that level of just utter shock. But this is why we're sports fans. What I hate is when we say this. I say this sometimes, and people are like, you're so unrealistic. You don't know ball. Shut up. And I'm like, man, why are we sports fans? If we can't dream, if we can't have big dreams and go into a World Cup and talk about the possibilities, like, that's the fun of it to me, like.
No, trust me, because I'm a Mariners fan, and I've been saying the Mariners are going to win a World Series since 1988, and it still hasn't happened right yet. But every spring we can dream, right? That's exactly right. I look at this, and I tend to agree with you, right? Because it's different from a Premier League season where you have 38 games where you have the benefit of a January transfer window. If things go wrong, you can add, you can subtract, all that good stuff. And your coach has the ability to work with them day in and day out. And because these FIFA windows are so small, there's only a finite amount of time where these guys can come together. But the beauty of the World Cup is it's 8 now or 9 now, 9 matches now, where pragmatism is the game. Yes, you have to score goals, but as we saw in the last edition of the Euros, England got there by via PKs. Like they had to get to that final, not necessarily scoring goals, and they had the best goal scorer in the world in Harry Kane. You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of international soccer, is that it, granted, yes, I mean, Spain can score goals at will, but the reality is the rest of the world is down to that one shot. And the way that the U.S. could potentially be set up is that, now granted, do I wish that I had a Tim Howard or a Landon Donovan? You know what I mean? For those nice. late match situations, yes, of course. But I mean, I still think the talent is potentially there to pull that 1-0 winner or that 2-1 winner. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of advantages with the U.S. and I think mainly is like I think that the way that the squad is built is to perform exactly as you just said.
Right. Like another, this is another good one that I was kind of thinking of, is just if you look back at I was trying to kind of like backtrack to all of the World Cups, right? So if you go to the 22 World Cup, do you remember who the big kind of shocker run was in the 22 World Cup offhand?
Wasn't it Saudi Arabia?
I think Morocco, right?
Morocco, yes. Morocco.
Right. So you had
they went to the semis, right?
Went to the semis, right? And if you go back to 2018, I believe it was Russia going to the semis, right? 2014 is the one offhand. I'd have to kind of peek at it. I don't remember. I remember 2002 was South Korea, and I'll look up 2014 and 2010. But
I got 2014 right here.
But my overall point, see if there's anybody in that one. It feels like every World Cup, or maybe it's every other technically.
Oh yeah, it was the Netherlands. It was the Netherlands that made it all the way to the semis, and they beat Costa Rica to get there.
Costa Rica made the quarters in that. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yep. Correct.
Right. Man, I mean, Costa Rica making the quarters is like probably as big of a deal as a lot of teams making the semis. That's a pretty unbelievable run for a tiny little nation, man. But like, yeah, you get like, Uruguay, once again, these are second tier, very, very good countries. Netherlands is a soccer power, right? Pretty much right on that same level as, right below Germany and Spain. They made the finals in 2010, but like you get, okay, so maybe a couple World Cups you don't have it, but it feels like about half the World Cups in my lifetime watching, you get a dark horse semifinalist, and that's what we need to be, right? And it's like,
well, a lot of luck is going to play into this, man. Like that's the other thing that is the other thing that comes into play, is that you're going to have to get that bounce. You're going to have to have that late goal stand, even through a barrage of shots from your opponent. But the other thing I want to talk about is injury, because the United States seemingly just does not have good luck when it comes to injury. And I think that kind of started in 2010, when prior to the World Cup, I think we lost Josie Altidore and Stu Holden heading into the 2010. So we didn't necessarily have two pieces that were supposed to be there. 2014, I think we lost Josie Altidore.
Josie like right away. It sucks.
We lost Josie right away. And essentially since the pre warm-ups of Copa America, when Tyler Adams hurt his back and didn't say anything and played through the Copa in pain, only to have surgery, and then he was out throughout the fall. We've lost our two strikers. Now Ricardo Pepi's out for the remainder of this season, but Balogun's out for an extended period of time with shoulder surgery. Josh Sargent just can't stay healthy, although he's back and he's kind of ripping it up right now. But we finally get Gio Reyna back. So there is a handful of things that have to go right between now and then, and one of them is like if you and I both agree that for the remaining windows leading up to the 2026 World Cup, that the only players that I want to see, with the exception of next January camp, the unsanctioned FIFA window, when it's generally Major League Soccer players, I want to see essentially the first teamers between now and then. Right? There's something about synergy, regardless of who you're playing. You kind of want to see familiar faces, so you can at least
Yeah.
Get that synergy back heading into a major tournament. Okay, great. But that being said, one of the things that the U.S. Men's National League cannot afford is another major injury.
Yeah, so there's some X factors that are going to go into this, right? And I think it's important to call those out. You just called out a great one.
Yeah.
We've already called out a couple. So if I really had to put a list down of like, hey, what are the X factors that have to happen for this, magical run to happen? One, you've got to have injury luck, right? And not just, I agree, not just at the World Cup, but kind of leading into the World Cup, we really need a run where a high percentage of these guys get to play together, right? It doesn't mean we can have no one coming back right before the World Cup, but like, we really need to get Dest back. We need to get the strikers back.
Yeah.
We need those guys to play the goals. Those guys to
Sergino Dest.
Play through the year, have a good club season, stay healthy, have a run of form. And we need whatever. If you looked at our top 15 guys, we need like 12 to 13 of those guys to just have a really healthy next year. And it almost like has to be Pulisic West. Like there's some key guys that you just have to. If you're missing those guys, it becomes way harder, right? But so that's X factor 1, injuries. X factor 2, which we mentioned already as well, is the draw, right? What's your draw? What's your draw if you do make it out of the group? Can you figure out a way to win the group so you get a good matchup in the first knockout round? It's kind of random, right? But like, where do you land in the knockouts? Who do you get to play in the second round? Is it a good matchup for you? Is there an upset that happens, right? So you get a weaker opponent in the second round, right? So like there's a lot, that's a massive X factor. And then my third one is, I'll say specific players. There's a couple specific players to me that are big factors, right? And these are my like big X factor guys, Dest, Gio, and Ballo. And I mentioned those three because I think those three are my three very high ceiling guys that if I look at like where can those guys go with the right club decision, the right kind of year in the next year, they can become big time game changers for us. All three of those guys. And I think probably you need two of those three guys to have excellent years next year and be firing as like key guys come World Cup. Without them, it's just way harder just because of the dynamicism, right? Like you need dynamic guys. And it can't just be Pooley on an island, right? With solid guys around him.
Correct.
And I mentioned those three because those are three of the most dynamic playmakers that we have that we haven't seen much out of, just being honest, right? Like we haven't seen that much out of them in the last 2 years. We've seen flashes, but we haven't really seen consistent form from them in the U.S. jersey.
You don't think Serginho Dest should stay at PSV for the next year?
I do think he should, yeah.
Just to kind of get back into the swing and regain his form heading into 2020.
Yeah, it's a high enough level. He should absolutely, to me, they're going to be like invested in him playing, right? There's not going to be any shenanigans where it's like, oh, he moves up and somebody doesn't want to play him and a new man. Like, absolutely. To be honest, there's not many guys that I think should move. Gio's one of the guys I think should move.
I think we'll touch that towards a little bit in a few minutes because I'm curious to see how you react to it. But I will say this, that, and I noticed that sometimes under Greg Berhalter, he had a habit of bringing guys in that were dealing with injuries because he wanted to actually get the U.S. physios get their hands on them. And to me, I didn't like the idea. Me personally, I would rather the players stay club side if they're dealing with a small little knock or a little niggling injury than coming into camp, making that 14-hour, 15-hour plane ride into the United States. Me personally, stay exactly where you're at. Stay exactly where you are. Let those physios deal with your injury. But most importantly, take the window off. Because if it's a matter of you just needing rest, you're going to have a good 2 weeks of essentially no football activity except for the last 14 days heading back into training as you're getting ready for the season to resume. Now, I don't think we've seen that too much under Poch because usually when there's been an injury, they've usually just stayed with their club. And so I'll give Poch credit there. But that being said, it's like, one of the things is you have to manage some of these injuries a little bit more proactively than reactively.
Poch has had 2 camps with the A team, right? Am I correct on that?
Ish. A team ish. I'll say A team adjacent. You know what I mean? Because like you've had Pulisic and Weah, and you've had some of the big names, but you've also had them surrounded with Brendan Aronson and Gianluca Busio.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, he had two camps where he really got to call the best guys that were available. And to your point, yeah, not everybody was available, but he's had two camps. Like that's how I kind of look at this, right? This is not, how long is a camp? 10 days? Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking two matches where they have like maybe three training sessions before a game. Yeah.
He's had 20 days with these guys, right? Maybe let's be generous and call it 10 training sessions, right? I think that's generous. But like, and to your point, it's maybe 60-70% of the actual full health A roster, right? That he's actually even been able to work with so far. So I just want to still note this thing is young. And I said the same thing a long, long time ago. I said the same thing in the Berhalter era when a lot of people in a totally different world of Twitter back then were criticizing Berhalter in 2019, we lost in the Gold Cup final and it was like, lost to Canada. I said the same thing back then, right? And I, as everybody knows, I did not end up being a Berhalter apologist, but I still was like, hey, let's give it time. Like, it's not fair to be like, ride this guy. It's like, you got to give somebody like 6 camps. Like, you just have to have 6 camps to establish what you're trying to do before you can even really judge. So the last X factor I just want to bring up is Poch. And you mentioned it before as well, but like that is an X factor. What is he going to be able to get out of this team over the next, call it 18 months, leading into World Cup 2026? Because that's another X factor. A great coach can pull more out of you than I think is expected, than you expect, than fans expect, than, the whatever media at large expect. And that's an X factor, man. Like having a great coach going into a knockout tournament, and there's always he gets us firing in a way that is just different and looks different and feels different.
I think his principles and his ideals have already been set in stone, and I think they already have. I wouldn't say they've perfected it because I don't think anybody can really perfect the idealism of a world-class coach. But you hear about players talking about some of the training sessions and some of the demands that Pochettino puts on them. And so from that standpoint, I think I think it's crystal clear exactly what's expected, which is a good thing because a lot of these players know exactly where they stand.
And I'll tell you what, like, to me, if I watch any sport, basketball is the one I certainly know the most about when it comes to actually coaching the X's and O's. But if you watch any sport, I think you can always tell a good coach by how quickly and easily players start to look comfortable. Because coaching, system, everybody has a different system. Different systems can win, right? We know that, right? Mm-hmm. People win national titles in basketball, pressing, playing slow, playing zone, that stuff doesn't matter, right? What matters is how well and how quickly you can get your guys to execute what you're trying to do. And the most promising thing to me through the 2 Poch camps was that in that Jamaica camp, we started looking like we were comfortable within the ideas. And honestly, like years into the Berhalter reign, we didn't look comfortable with the ideas. Against bad opponents, we wouldn't look comfortable with the ideas and with creating chances, right? And a game like the Jamaica away game, the home Jamaica game, like there was some flashes in there where it was like, man, if that's what we look like after 10 days of training, what is this going to look like when we get everybody in and we have 30 days of training under our belt, right? Like, so
Correct.
I'm really optimistic, just kind of checking in on the Poch. I don't know. We haven't checked in together on it in a while.
I will say that in that January camp, even a roster full of MLSers, man, they look comfortable in transition. And what I mean by that is sometimes you'll see them ride with the back 4, but generally speaking, when they transition to 2 wing backs and playing in a back 3, it doesn't look like even the the B side and the C side has problems transitioning from a base 4-2-3-1, or if they want to roll a 3 in the back. It looks like these guys are comfortable in any direction Pochettino is going to want to take them, and I actually think it's probably going to end up being a back 3. Because who's playing left back, man?
Well, I think, listen, what we've seen so far is
who's playing not left back, but left center back, right? So I mean, in a back three, they can roll with McKenzie and Richards, and maybe you can, maybe if you're attacking on a certain side, one guy can stay back.
Yeah, I don't think he'll play three center backs, but I think I'm sounds like you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. What we've seen so far is he's been like, oh, we have Jedi and we have Scally. Well, I'm going to leave Scally at home. He's not as strong going forward.
Correct.
Right. So in possession, we're going to be more three in the back, and then we're going to have, more transition protection because we have three guys back there. Right. I think where he's going to land is Jedi in that role. I really do. And I don't think it's going to mean Jedi never goes forward, but I think if we have Jedi and Dest, I think he's going to see Dest in the role that we saw Jedi in and just kind of invert it. Right.
I don't know, man, because when you have that type of weapon, and you see it with Fulham, when on the overlapping runs, just exactly the kind of weapon that Jedi is in the attack, and especially if you float Christian a little bit more centrally, if you want to even invert Christian a little bit, and it kind of rolling him as a false nine with that overlap coming in the attack with
you can do it. You can do it. The problem is if Dest is healthy. I think if Dest isn't healthy, I think that's what we see. And it's great. The problem is if Dest's healthy, I think it makes zero sense. And I think Poch will see that. It makes zero sense to have Dest, a worse defender, smaller.
No, I hear you. I hear you, right? But that's a good problem.
I do think
that's a great problem to have, though.
I do think tactically I don't think it's going to be rigid, right? I don't think you're going to never see Jedi getting forward. I think it's going to be a little bit more. I think it's going to be like what we saw to Scally. Scally got forward a little bit. It was more opportunistic and in moments, but for the most part, his role was kind of to stay home. The other thing I've heard people say, which is interesting, is do you find a way to, I think we saw this in one of the Jamaica games, if I'm not mistaken. We saw him invert Jedi into the midfield.
Correct.
And Jedi was kind of in the dual pivot. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you had, I forget who else was dropped back. But that's the other things. A great coach is going to be able to make those kind of changes. This is what's great about having just a good coach. A great coach can make that kind of change and get guys to be comfortable with it quickly, right? And I think an average or poor coach doesn't even see that kind of change, or if they do try and make it, they make it way too complex and they give guys head spinning. The way Jedi was able to kind of invert into that, it's almost like the way that Pep uses his fullbacks in that same way at times, right? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of cool. I was like, wow. When I remember at the beginning of the game, I was like, this isn't going to work. Jedi can't do this. And then I was like, whoa, he looks pretty damn good doing it. So I don't think we're going to be rigid. That's the other cool thing, right? Is I think with a good coach, he's going to be able to flex it. He's going to be able to flex tactics to the opponent and flex those tactics in a way that makes sense, given our personnel and given what the strategy is for the game. And that's also really cool. So I'm pumped to see that evolve, right? As we go through these games too.
Well, and I was going to mention that. Because depending on who you play at the 8, right, allows you more flexibility to invert Jedi into the midfield, right? Because if you have McKennie, then you can play him a little bit more centrally, but also a little bit more higher. And we've seen McKennie attack channels at Juve from that position as well too. Same thing with Yunus Musa. And I know that he likes to play Musa out wide a little bit. I still think Musa's best position is a little bit more centrally, but that's
we haven't seen Adams with Poch yet, right?
I don't think so. No,
I don't think so.
Was he there for the Jamaica camp?
I don't think so. We could check it, but I'm almost positive we haven't seen Adams with Poch yet. And I think what's really interesting there is what does he do with Adams, right? There's some interesting stuff you can do with Adams. And Adams, you could
Adams right now. By the way, Tyler Adams right now is in the best form that he's been in a very, very long time, right? So it's he walks right into the starting 11, 100%. For
sure.
The question is who do you run a double pivot with, right? Or do you run a single CDM? Do you run Tyler with Johnny Cardoso in a double pivot?
Right. There's some flexibility there. I'm open to some options. I personally want to see Gio play under Poch, and I want to see what Poch can do with Gio. And I think Weston McKennie, to me, is the Swiss Army knife on this team. He can go anywhere. He can play anywhere. To me, I love Wes playing in kind of the more box to box ish double pivot role, the guy who maybe has a little more freedom to get forward. To me, I still think Wes is great at that. But heck, if we play Wes up at the 10, he's proven he can do, productive things in the attacking half, and Johnny's good too. So I mean, there's a lot of cool flexibility. Let me say this though, with Tyler, what I'm interested to see is if he makes the call to invert Dest, even, right? You could invert Dest into the middle of the field in possession, where he actually is probably a little bit more comfortable. You could do Jedi too. Push Tyler back into a back three with the center backs, right?
Yeah.
And then utilize guys like Weah's with Musa, if he's in the games with, Pooley can play wide. So like utilizing, or maybe it's like Jedi inverts. You have Weah wide, like we saw in the Jamaica game, wide of Jedi. You have Dest wide on the other side. Then you have, kind of the dual tens, with Pooley and Gio or something like that as dual tens. There's a lot of possibilities given what Potts showed us in 2 games. And when I think about our personnel, there's some cool options that I'm excited to see how he handles.
And the great part about guys like Yunus Musa, guys like Weston McKennie, and guys like Timmy Weah is their flexibility is so uncanny. As a matter of fact, we've seen both Weston McKennie, Timmy Weah, and Yunus Musa get run at wingbacks for their clubs already. Like, we're not talking just like an off start. We're talking like significant minutes. There's a reason why Potts has really only called in 2, maybe even 3 fullbacks in the camp because of the flexibility. And that's to me is another reason why we actually have to have this conversation, is because I can't remember a U.S. men's national team that had this much flexibility. Tons. And so many different options where you can actually adjust tactically to your opponent and not leave yourself weak in one area of the field, where U.S. men's national teams of the past were very stationary. We're very left back, 2 center backs, right back, and that's pretty much all they could play. So
what are your thinking World Cup now, right? So what are our question marks? What for you? Where are the question marks at going in, other than injury, right? If we kind of think, okay, knock on wood, we'll get some injury luck. When you're looking across the field right now, where are you seeing the gaps?
Striker.
Agreed. There's some good options, but I agreed.
That old saying in football where if you have 2 quarterbacks, you really don't have one.
Right.
We have 3 strikers, but we really don't have one yet, right? And I think a lot of people think that it's going to be Ricardo Pepi come 2026, and that very well could be. The downside of this is the fact that he hurt his knee and he had surgery on it, right? So it's not just recovery time, but it's also ramping up to a full 90, and then hopefully that he hits the ground running again. Like he pulls a Josh Sargent and just starts putting in goals again.
I'll say this. Pepe is a guy that, whether it's a move or it's, just becoming more of like the full-time guy next year, full on all year, playing in big Champions League matches, playing in the, the biggest matches in the Dutch league. Like, we need to see him do it against high level competition. Like, I'll be honest, when I look at his goal tally going all the way back to FC Dallas, it's a lot of goals. It's a lot of goals against small time guys. And he's not a guy who's really had a ton of success in the bigger games. And it worries me, right? It doesn't mean he can't do it. It doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means I am yet to see it. And I really would like to, before we go, yep, you're the guy who's going to be the 9 in the knockout round match when we have to beat somebody really good, right? Now, equal questions about Ballo, right? I have seen Ballo perform against some higher level teams, but big question marks in other ways, right? He hasn't been in the best form for the last 12 plus months, right? He's hurt, right? Like, so same thing. Sargent, you can make the same points about Pepe, right? We're yet to really see him do it at a super high level. So I totally agree with you. Striker is a total question mark for me. I don't know who's going to be the guy that we can rely on in big games against tough opponents to go in and like play big time at the 9.
As somebody that was really glued into the league phase of the Champions League, I will say that, Pepe did have some big goals against some very big opponents in the Champions League this year. But I will say that when he had his best run in league form, he was doing it against, Heracles Almo or the Go Ahead Eagles. He was doing it against like bottom half Eredivisie sides, right? But
For
that
sure.
being said, he was getting garbage time minutes because Frankie De Jong was getting most of the minutes there at PSV. I got to be honest with you, goalie really isn't that big of a concern for me. And the reason why I don't think it's going to be that big a concern to me is because of two people. It's going to be Chris Richards and Tyler Adams, right? If you have good tactically sound defenders playing in front of you, it does relieve a little bit of pressure. Now, that being said, next year is a huge year for Matt Turner because I don't know how you feel about the goaltender situation because number one, I have a feeling Matt Turner is going to be number one in 2026, right? So
I don't see who else it would be at this point.
Well, I mean, Patrick Schulte would have to make the move to Europe, and he would have to start, and he would have to be playing at such a consistently, decent level to overtake that number one. I think Patrick Schulte is going to be number two, and I think Diego Cochin is not going to really come into play until 2030. And I just think that just from a veteran presence, and because he's been getting a bulk of the minutes even while not playing at Crystal Palace, that's pretty much letting everybody know that Matt Turner is going to be back there in 2026, and I'm okay with that because I think in certain situations Matt Turner could be fine. My biggest thing is the evolution of a guy like Chris Richards, who over the course of the season, from the start of the season where he was looking a little leaky, and over the course of the last 5 weeks, he's really kind of evolved into being that stopper for Crystal Palace. Like his last 4 matches for Palace have been absolutely brilliant, and it comes at a perfect time because with all the question marks at center back, it's nice having a guy that you can literally pencil into that starting 11. Same thing with Tyler Adams, right? So if there is 2 guys that are going to alleviate some pressure, it's going to be those 2 guys, and I'm perfectly fine with that, and I'm perfectly fine with Jedi Robinson out there on the left. I think he's actually a pretty brilliant defender. So from that standpoint, goalie is not that big of a question mark.
Yeah, it is for me. I'll be honest. Because at the end of the day, I hear what you're saying, but I'll be honest. At the end of the day, in the World Cup, your goalie's going to have to come up.
Yeah,
if you're going to make a run, if you're going to do what we said, your goalie's going to have a massive game. Like it's very rare for one of those dark horse teams to make a run and the goalie doesn't like stand on their absolute head once or twice. Like, maybe not to the Timmy Howard, like level. That's fine, but like we're going to need Turner to like be a dude in a couple games and like save a couple goals that maybe he shouldn't, and certainly have errors, right? Like can't have errors. Like there's no margin for error. Like can't.
Do you think he's not capable of doing that?
I definitely do, but like it's still a question mark when a guy is like had the type of run that he's had for the last couple of years club wise, where just not playing as much as you'd like overall, and doesn't have a consistent club for multiple years where he's a locked in guy. Like listen, like we grew up on U.S. keepers kind of all over Europe, like being the guy and having multiple options where it's like, whoa, we have multiple options of guys who are Premier League, Bundesliga level keepers that we could throw in there and we feel great about it. And I don't see that. I do agree. Like I agree that Turner's the guy. My question mark is like, what's he gonna do? Who is he gonna be? I would say like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like ring the alarm, I have no idea what's going on, or 1 is like I have Tim Howard between the posts. I'm at like a 5, like I'm in the middle where it's like we'll see.
Yeah, I'm actually at a 5 as well too, and I'm right there with you. But again, like the bigger question to me is who's going to be playing that left center back position. Is it going to be Mark McKenzie, and has he done enough to really put himself into that center back pairing, or is it going to be a guy like Tim Ream who's playing left back for Charlotte FC? You know what I mean? Like, or is it going to be a guy like Nokai Banks? You know what I mean? Is he going to emerge over the course of the next
ready? Yeah.
Is he going to be ready?
Yeah. Are you going to be able to turn Henri Chase. Like there's a lot of potentials, but
That's
all of them are very like up in the air, or like, yeah, running Tim Ream back out doesn't sound great to me. McKenzie, like same thing as Turner. It's like, okay. Like if he's starting, I'm kind of like, okay. Like,
okay.
Let's see.
Well,
but I don't feel great about it.
You mentioned Gio Reyna, and I think it's opportune. Hold on. Okay, let me take one step back real quick before we get to Gio. Now, I think you and I both agree that Matt Turner cannot be a backup next season. Like he has to be starting.
He's got to play
somewhere.
I don't care.
He's got to play, right? This last cup match against Millwall for Crystal Palace, that was his 4th appearance of the season. 4.
He's got to play.
Okay?
I don't care.
He's got to play.
I really don't.
Yeah,
care.
like, I was going to ask you, like, would you rather see him? Like, let's say that the only starting option in England is in the Championship. Do you care if it's in Major League Soccer or the Championship, or no?
I'll be honest. Keeper is the one position that I think like it's the most overrated when people say, "Well, he's got to play in Europe." Like it's a good indicator. It's a good indicator of who's a good keeper for sure. Like I would definitely like to have somebody the Premier League club wants, to start every game for sure. But at the end of the day, I don't think we have anybody who in 2026 is going to be at that level. So I would like for whoever the candidates are going to be playing, because at the end of the day, and I was a keeper growing up, and I'm not saying it's not harder to be a Premier League keeper, right? But let's just be honest. Is it harder to be a keeper for a middle of the league MLS club, or is it harder to be a keeper for Celtic? It's like, I think some people would say, I want him at Celtic. I want him in Europe. To me, it's like, I don't think the keeper at Celtic in 85% of their games does anything. Like I've watched a decent amount of Celtic.
Yeah, so
probably too much in the last 2 years, random Scottish games to watch CCV and now try
by the way, is there anything better than random Scottish Premier League matches? Dude, I watch all the time. Dude, I'll watch.
I feel like I'm wasting my life. I'm like, all right, man. What am I like?
Dude,
I
will watch Ross County versus Motherwell. You know what I mean? And not even give 2 shits about it. I love it. But
the point is if you're playing for a top level team in Europe, you actually have less shots against you. You have less pressure. You have
depends.
It's the same thing with CCV, in my opinion. Like CCV in most of his games is not under a ton of pressure in the same way that a lot of other guys are. So
yeah, unless it's the Champions League, but yeah, I hear
that's fine. You get your 8 Champions League games. That's fine, but that's 8 out of 45 games. It's you need week in, week out pressure when you're a defender and when you're a goalie. And once again, I'm not saying that you can't be the Celtic keeper and be really good. You absolutely sure you can. If Matt Turner was at Celtic playing all year next year, I'm fine. I'm just kind of making a sweeping point here, which is I don't know. No. I don't know if it's better to be the Celtic keeper or the Revolution keeper. I really don't. I don't know which one of those actually in a single season preparing for a World Cup. Remember, that's what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about your career. We're talking about, hey, you get 1 year now to prepare for this World Cup. I don't know if it's better to be the Celtic keeper than the Revolution keeper. I know that I want you on the field every game, and I want you
right.
And I want you used to pressure.
I'll say this, that there's a benefit of playing in Major League Soccer, and I know this is where I'm going to get accused of being an MLS stan or an MLS shill or whatever the buzzword is. But the reality is there's a couple reasons. Number one, Major League Soccer wants active U.S. men's national team players playing in their league. That's the first, and they'll pay good money for it. But the other reason is if you go to a good team, not the best teams in the league, not like Miami or NYCFC or the LA Galaxy or LAFC, but if you go to a good solid playoff team like Real Salt Lake or Seattle or Cincinnati, where you're going to be able to win some games. But the most important thing is you're going to get yourself into a rhythm, and you're going to actually get your confidence back. Your shot stopping is going to be on point playing in Major League Soccer, because if you know this league is geared towards goals, scoring a lot of goals. That's the whole thing of Major League Soccer. So you're going to see a lot of shots, and your reflexes and your footwork, all of that is going to be tested. And that's the thing. It's like you talk about the difference between Celtic and Seattle. Well, I would probably argue that it's a little bit better for you to be in Seattle, just the way that Major League Soccer is geared. You're going to see a lot more shots. You're going to see a lot more shots, and that's actually going.
In back-to-back years in high school, right? I played 2 years, right? And this is we had an all-state keeper who was way better than me. Played varsity as a freshman. Was awesome. Played at James Madison, had an awesome D1 career, was conference player of the year. Ridiculous player, right? He was the guy I was kind of, in practice with every day growing up, was always behind him. Freshman year, I played freshman, he played varsity, right? We had I think maybe a sophomore, junior played JV. But sophomore year, I played JV. 2 separate years, I'm still playing soccer, right? 1 year, our freshman team was really good. I literally never saw shots. Being a keeper on that team was really easy. Like, I wasn't tested very much. And as a keeper, like getting better is about being under. Like you get better when you're under. You just do. Like, and my sophomore year was the exact opposite for a lot of reasons. It was totally different. And I felt like I was growing and getting better as a sophomore when I was under pressure all the time. And like at the end of the day, a shot is a shot, right? Like a breakaway is a breakaway. Is somebody in a really good European league going to be better at putting it away than somebody in MLS? Like, yeah, sure. Maybe. Agreed. No, they probably will be on the whole, but
probably will. Yeah.
But if you're telling me like I get to face, I'm just going to make up numbers, right? I get to face 21 on-0s playing in MLS, and I get 2 of those playing with Celtic, I'm getting better facing 20. Like,
right.
For sure.
Yeah. But in the context of the U.S. men's national team heading into a World Cup, you want to be on point as much as you possibly can. You want to come in nothing but confidence.
You don't want to be into the World Cup and going, haven't been in this moment in 4 months, right? Or like, I've only been in 3 of these games over the last 4 months. Like, not ideal at all, which is what makes me nervous about Turner. Is like, is he going to be playing next year? Like that.
And Matt Turner, for the lack of a better term, he's coming in just with training, right? Because he's only had 4 appearances this year. He doesn't have a lot of actual game time this year.
Training is not the same as a keeper.
Just say that. Not the same.
Not the same. Totally different. It really is. Like it is the difference between kicking a field goal in game and practicing in practice. It really is that's the difference in my opinion. Like there's just no stakes when you're trying to save goals in practice. It's kind of like a fun venture. And if you let it in, it's like, you have
another one. You got another
whatever
one.
It's practice. Like, we're down 1-0 in our practice session. Like game is totally different, man. Like, so I want as many game reps as possible for Matt or whoever's in there.
You mentioned Gio. And I 100% agree with you. You brought up an interesting thing about how Twitter today wasn't, the Twitter of 2018, 2019. It's a different context now. And I noticed that on Twitter, a lot of people were saying that when Dortmund switched managers, that this was going to be a reckoning for Gio Reyna. And this is going to be a new fresh start. He's going to be with a new manager. And sure enough, it really hasn't worked out that way. He got a couple starts in the Bundesliga recently to not much success. I happen to agree with you. My question to you is there a league or a team that you feel is the best fit for Gio Reyna? Is this something where maybe he can go back to the Premier League to test himself again if it's the right fit? Is this more like of another Bundesliga, or is it a Serie A type of deal?
Let's go. I want to go one step back even. I want to get to that question because I think it's a really good one. First of all, my red flags are firing with Gio. They just are. Yeah. I do want to be respectful of this. I don't know the scenario and situation, right? Like
I've heard rumblings.
Yeah, I've heard things like you hear this.
It's all second.
You also never know in terms of like, is it club putting it out there for a political you have no idea. we don't know. My red flags are fired, right? It's a lot of managers. It's a lot of spots. He's really talented. When he gets
And
on the
it's the
field,
same.
when he
It's the
gets on the
same
field,
result.
he seems to figure out how to do stuff. You know, it's not like he's like totally unproductive. Like scored a banger 2 months ago. Like he could do stuff. Like what is the holdup? Like that's what I really want to learn and really want to figure out. But at the same point, I also kind of don't care from a national team perspective. I want Poch to treat Gio right. Like listen, like Gareth Bale had a ton of issues at Real Madrid. Had some magical moments, but like overall, it was like a scattered 4 or 5 years where he was like in and out of the lineup, didn't play for long stretches.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he would get in and, you know, like win the Champions League final with a bicycle kit, like a crazy juxtaposition of performances. But when he came to Wales, the Wales coach didn't give up about Israel. Like he's like, you can help this team. This is a separate team. And that's what people have to understand.
You are Gareth Bale. Do what you do.
Too many people care about club when it comes to national team, right? Like national team coaches, yes, they're tracking the club performances. Yes, watching a player do well is helpful. But you better believe if a national team coach sees a player that can help them and help them win, they're not going to say, well, you have to earn it at club first. That is so stupid. I see people say that all the time. That's just not reality. If I'm a coach, I'm trying to win with the U.S. men's national team. I'm going to look at my pool and I'm going to say, which guys can potentially help me? There's no doubt Gio Reyna could help me. Now the question is, bring him in, right? And when he plays for me as Mauricio Pochettino, can I get something out of him? Do I like coaching him? Does he fit in with our team? Is he a cancer on our team? Is he helpful on our team? Like those are questions you have to answer in the context of the U.S. men's national team. Now, if he wants to gain some information by club and talking to people and maybe like figuring out, you know, what's going on, that's fine. He's bringing him in and he's going to play him and he's going to figure out if he helps him. That's just like a fact. And so before I get to where he should go in club, I want to just say that I don't care. I want Poch to play him in his system, and I want Poch to see if he can help us. And what I've seen out of Gio in spurts is like he can be a really productive player. There's also a lot of flaws there, which honestly Poch might see those flaws and be like, doesn't work for us. Rather have Wes there and kind of figure it out, and we need more effort. That might be what happens. That's okay, right? Like, but I want to see Gio in the jersey under Poch, and I want to see what Poch can do with him, what he can bring out of him, what he can motivate in him. And what we've seen with national teams, if you follow this stuff for decades like we have, is like it can be a total refresher for a guy like Gio. He can come into the national team, and it's just like a way to get away from the BS of what's going on at the club, the political stuff, and am I going to move? Am I going to not? And we might just get the best out of him. Who knows, right? Where he should go, he should go to the Netherlands. He should go to the Eredivisie. Yeah. That's where he needs to go. I mean, like his path needs to be exactly what Serginho Dest is. And it hasn't been exactly the same, but it's just like there was a 2-year like Dest in the wilderness, I think, where Dest went from playing for Barca and like looking like he was going to be a guy to like a year and a half of like, whoa, what's going on with Serginho Dest? A lot of people were giving up on him. Similar to Gio, saying, well, we shouldn't call him in. You know, he's not playing for Milan. You know, that was stupid. And it was just like he needs to go to a level where a club's going to invest in him and a club is going to maybe buy him on the cheap. With, you know, Ajax, I could see, right? PSV, I could see a lot of those kind of clubs saying, let's go buy him. This is a guy we could sell for 40 million potentially 3 years from now. You know, like
I do have an Eredivisie team that is a little bit interesting. It's FC Utrecht. Right now, Paxton Aronson, who is on loan from Eintracht Frankfurt, who's playing the 10 at FC Utrecht, and they're currently third in the Eredivisie, and that fits everything that you were just saying. And by the way, it also has another U.S. men's national team player by the name of Taylor Booth playing on that team as well too. So there are some familiar faces there, but I like that. I like that a bit. I'll just say the only thing I care about when it comes to club in relation to the national team is, are you playing? That's it. That's the only thing I care about, right? I don't even necessarily care about your goal production. The reality is because FIFA windows are so short and the training, you know, you only have a small amount of time of training. If you're not playing, you got to spend those limited amount of training sessions getting something close to sharpness for you to even be somewhat remotely effective on the pitch. Because if you're not playing, and it's the same thing, it's the exact same conversation with goalies as it is with forwards. You have to have a certain amount of sharpness that only comes from playing, and that would be my only issue when it comes to club.
Here, I'll give you some pushback there as well to make the show interesting here. Agreed, 95% of the time. There are cases, right, where a guy isn't playing. We just saw it last cycle with Timmy Weah. He really wasn't playing that much for long stretches for Lille and was getting like spot minutes. And I hope that the manager at least is like, that's fine. It's a piece of information. It can't be the whole story. Some people are absolutists with it, which I think is absurd. It's like, he's not playing for club. He's not playing for club. He shouldn't be called in. It's like, well, that's silly. Like, we wouldn't have had Timmy Weah a lot. Like, you literally could have been like, well, Timmy Weah is not coming to the World Cup. He's not playing right now. He hasn't played for 6 months that much, which would have been stupid and silly. And obviously you're never going to do that. And I know you don't agree with that. I hear what you're saying. And I think what you're saying is valuable, but I do mention that like there are going to be edge cases where a manager has to like figure out what's going on with that club scenario and be like, well, he's stuck right now and it's fine. It sucks. Let's see if he can bring it for the national team still. And if he can't bring it for the national team, then fine. Like, don't play him. Stop calling him if that's fine. But if he does what Timmy Weah did, which was honestly be like one of our key attackers for, a 2-year span.
I think the difference was that Timmy Weah was still getting minutes as a sub. He was still being brought on for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the case may be. Got a couple starts. The thing with Gio is like there's stretches where he's not even coming off the bench. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying don't bring him in. I actually want to see him in a U.S. shirt. But my whole thing is like there's a difference between not playing and being the first or second guy off the bench. There's a vast difference from that. I don't know. That's just the way I feel about it. I think playing even in limited minutes is better than what's going on right now with Dortmund.
Yeah, I mean he's got to get out of there. I mean there's like literally zero doubt about that. I think his talent is so obvious. And I'm going to throw out another team as well too. And this is also a team that I think Josh Sargent should try to get on as well too. And that's Everton. With David Moyes. David Moyes loves American players. He has no problem taking chances on American players. He's the type of guy that, essentially turned Tim Howard into who he was. Also gave Landon Donovan a huge run in the Premier League when a lot of people didn't think that he was really on that level. I wouldn't go to the Premier League if I was Gio. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't go to England in general. Like it's either the Netherlands or it's Italy for me. The most friendly places, are Netherlands and Italy right now in terms of just even stylistically and like I'll be honest, Gio just kind of needs an offensive friendly league. He needs a league that is a little bit more he needs a club that's a little more attacker friendly. He needs to be in a place where I wouldn't go there yet. But I mean, listen, he's like he's 2 moves away though. Like I love Gio. I'm a pretty big Gio defender, but like no, I mean it would be the second move. Like I think he needs to make one move in Europe down. I don't know if he's even going to do that. I think his people surrounding him have so much pride. Oh, he was going to go to Man City a couple years ago. Like, just suck it up, bro. And just like he can't go. My problem with a club like Utrecht, like I would love it. They haven't bought anybody for over $2 million. Like you just can't. It has to be a club that they're going to have to meet Dortmund in the middle, right? Dortmund also had Gio valued at like over 20 million not that long ago, right? So Dortmund's not going to take like a total hit on that. I think they're going to want to sell him for still $10 million, right? Maybe it goes to 8. Like, so who are the clubs that can pay that much? It's not that
PSV. Much. It's PSV. PSV can do it, and Ernie Stewart is the football operations out there. Ajax can do it. Feyenoord can do it.
Streamyard can do it as well. Yeah. So there's a couple options, right? Like honestly, I just think like playing 10 games against pretty bad teams, which if we're honest about the Dutch league, that is the case. There are 10 pretty bad teams like that honestly aren't that much different than MLS comp. Like as much as some people want to make you think that it is, it's not. Like 10 of the games is pretty similar, but he kind of needs that. but having the option to also play in some Champions League ball, which I think will keep his pride, right? Of like, hey, we make the Champions League. You can still play Champions League. Like, this is a prestigious league, right? Like, you're still going to get to compete in the derby games if you go to Ajax. Like, I think that's the middle ground, right? It's like, you go to Ajax. Ajax is a historic club, right? Like, to me, you're going to have to get Gio, his dad, all those people bought into it. And something like that, a PSV or an Ajax, is like a good medium ground. Or some clubs in Italy, I still worry a little bit about that. I worry about him, finding his way in some of those clubs. He's in a really precarious spot right now, club-wise, man. He's got to figure it out. It's got to happen in the next year, or it's like we're getting to a point where it's been like 4 years since he's like played consistently for a club, and it's like, where are we going?
Yeah, I heard he wasn't the greatest teammate in the world, and there's a lot of back.
See it? I don't know, but I could see it. There's a lot of red flags, man. Like, something's up. Like, it's a lot of managers that you're running into some issues with, and at some point, hopefully, you grow up and you kind of realize some things maybe you need to change, and it's you stop blaming every manager, and it becomes okay. Let me make some changes. But I don't know. I don't know enough about the situation to really say that firmly. Just
I'll tell you what, man. Accountability is a bitch. You know what I mean? Before, if you're not mature enough. I mean, look at Wes. I mean, he got booted out of the national team camp, and a year and a half later, he's wearing the armband at Juventus. So it can be done if you have the right mentality. It can be done. Before we get out of here, I got to ask you one thing, and that's Christian Pulisic and your take on what's happening in Milan. They sacked Paulo Fonseca, and of course, Christian Pulisic was arguably Milan's best player for the first half, a little bit more than half the season. He gets a little knock. He goes out for a little bit, but when he comes back, Sergio Conceição, their new head coach, has somebody else playing on the right-hand side. Even Yunus Musa was playing on the right-hand side there. Your read on the situation in Milan, and is this a situation where chances are pretty good that Conceição is gone at the end of the season, and Milan's dealing with a new manager again, or is this going to be a situation where he's just going to trust his Portuguese players over a guy like Christian Pulisic? And could this be a situation where maybe Christian might have to find a new home?
Dude, this is like just what sucks about like European soccer in general, right?
There's an American bias.
There's for sure an American bias. And I think at the end of the day, you never know when you're going to run into the managers change so much that you never know when you're going to run into a manager who has that bias, right? You also, like, managers come in and want to build their own thing. And if the team sucked, they're like, well, I don't know, I'm benching it. They make asinine decisions, right? And then like a year later, people are like, well, Pulisic sucks. And it's like, hey, this is what happens, right? And this is why you also just don't know with Gio. You have no idea like what actually is going on. There's been so many managerial changes there over like a 2-year run now. Dortmund, let's be honest about it. Dortmund has kind of sucked for Dortmund's standard for multiple years now, right? It's kind of become a mess, come a little messy in terms of like what's going on in Dortmund. And like it can flip like that. It can go from like, man, this guy's balling, but Milan's not doing as well as they want to do. With him balling, they're not doing as well as you want to do. I think he's got to stay put. So my resolution here is he's got to stay put and see who the next manager is, right? I'll just say this again, and people say I'm crazy, and people have really critiqued me for this, and I think it's fair to critique me for this. My ultimate level for all of our players, like as crazy as this sounds, is like a level below where they can probably play at their optimal, which I actually think AC Milan kind of is for Pulisic. I think he could kind of push for like a top end team. And I think AC Milan is the right level. I'm not advocating for him to move down, but I'm just saying this is why I always say if you can push to go to Chelsea, you should go to, Forest. I don't know. You should go, maybe that's not the right club. You should go one notch down, right? You should go to the Europa club in the Premier League, right? That's probably where you're going to be able to find your best footing. as opposed to pushing to the absolute top level that you can push to. And that run, I get why that runs counter to a lot of people's beliefs. I get why that sounds crazy.
I agree with you. No, I
These are
100%
the
agree
reasons
with you.
why, man. Because like we actually need our players to be so good at their club that a manager can't deny them. You know, that it's like, well, this guy's so obvious. Like Jedi, I love that he stayed at Fulham. Like, you cannot tell me Jedi moving to Milan or Liverpool or any other place he's been rumored. You can't tell me he would have had a better couple years in terms of his development and growth. He's been a go-to guy in the Premier League for a good team. Like, he's not better if he goes to Man City and then becomes like a rotational guy. Like, he's
Correct.
just not.
Correct.
So, go to Fulham. You're good at Fulham, man. You have a great thing going. To me, Pooley, hopefully has a great thing going at AC Milan. Hopefully with the right manager, he can kind of reestablish it and keep it rolling. And I just would love for him to stay there for the rest of his career. I don't need him to go to Real Madrid. I no interest in it personally.
You know, 100% there's an American bias, right? Because if you have three players that are producing at relatively the same levels, and one of them is a dude from Portugal, one of them is a dude from France, and one of them is a dude from the United States, they're going to take the other two guys, and that guy from the United States has to prove himself all over again when he's already proven himself. Right. That was the thing. It's like when he touched ground in Milan, dude, that dude was an instant goal. And we saw it early in the season under Fonseca, and I can actually make a case that Milan was better under Fonseca than they are with Conceição.
I think they were. Sure.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And the reality is, it's now like, how is like, and I would probably assume that Christian has that in the back of his head. Like, if he stays at Milan, is this what it's going to be? I'm going to come in on the 60th minute. I'm going to get only 30 minutes, and I'm not starting, even though that the options on the right wing aren't better than I am. Right? There's going to be a potential issue, and I know what Christian is saying. I know he came out publicly and said everything is good in Milan. I want to be here. Listen. I read that. I let that. I kind of just chew on it a little bit, and it's like he can't be happy right now. Like, I don't think Christian Pulisic he's healthy, and he's not necessarily seeing the field, and Milan is struggling, and I'm sure he's thinking like, with me on the field for a good 70, 80 minutes, I'm good for a goal, possibly two. This might be a little bit different. I don't know. Like, you brought up the, the analogy of not necessarily moving to the top teams, but, just like a step below, like a Nottingham Forest or another Premier League, Europa League squad. How about Tottenham Hotspur?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of opportunity. Like, I just think that Christian Pulisic right now is smack dab right in the middle of his prime. And he's probably going to be there for another 4 years.
Moving doesn't solve it, though. That's the problem, right? Because moving, you just can run.
It does. It does if you're going to a team that is going to commit to you. You know what I mean?
AC Milan's committed to them. They just happen to make a managerial change where that manager isn't committed to him. So, like, if he could go to somewhere where you're going to tell me, yep, we get the same manager for the next 5 years, it just doesn't exist. Like,
it doesn't exist. Yeah,
it's just not a thing. Not at the level we want him to play at, right? Not if you want him to play at a team that has Champions League aspirations. As soon as you get into 7th place for half a season, that person's gone. It's like auto, right? And so that's my problem. Is like, make a move here. That place is great right now. And it's like, yeah, in a year and a half, it might not be. And then you're just in the same spot again. So it's like,
yeah, I hear you.
He has history with Milan. The club, I think, is invested in him. I think that, and I think they've seen what he can do. It's just like, I'm trying to talk myself into Christian Pulisic at Tottenham Hotspur. That's what all this is about. I love it. Yeah,
I just want him there. But mainly is we're a year out from the World Cup, and he literally is our best player. And the last thing I want to see him is in a situation where he's not getting the game time that is, respectful of Christian Pulisic. Like, I don't think anybody looks at that situation and says, like, this is a good thing for Christian right now. That's all I'm saying.
No, it's not. I mean, it's got to flip for sure. Hey, give me 30 seconds on our boys at Wrexham.
Wrexham. Well, I think they just had they had a 1-0 victory away at Huddersfield Town.
Saw that. Yeah. Didn't watch it.
Home dude, the 37-year-old striker got the game winner. I'll just say this:
is it Wickham that they're behind right now? They play them.
They're behind. They're behind Portsmouth and Wickham.
And I think Wickham's the one they're right behind. I think they play them next week. It's a massive match. It's either in a week.
Yep, they're sitting 2 points off the automatic promotion spots. I think they're going to do it, but I will have this caveat: when is Wrexham
Stockport too coming up, which is a big one.
100%. When is Wrexham going to invest? When are they going to flip their transfer strategy and actually invest in some youth? They brought in Sam Smith, who's like young, I guess, for them because he's 26, about to be 27. But they brought in Jay Rodriguez, who's like 36. Their captain is 35, 36. You know what I mean? It's like they got some old guys, right? And the question is like, what's going to happen with Paul Mullen, right? Moles was basically, shut it out of the first team because he just didn't get off the mark this season. It's like, what's going to happen next year, right? So let's say that they get promoted. Let's say they get promoted to the championship. They're probably going to have the exact same strategy because they at the very least want to stay in the championship. But eventually,
their strategy is pretty simple, right? It's just like they're just reinvesting at each level, trying to bring in veterans that can hopefully up the level so that they can, get promoted again. I don't see why they wouldn't repeat that, if they get to the championship. I think the youth thing's an interesting thought. I don't know why they would do it though.
The youngest guys on the roster, I think, are Max Clayworth, Arthur Okonkwo, and I think that's it.
I feel like they're just trying to microwave it, dude. And I feel like they feel like if they can get to the Premier League, they can have enough money and they can, potentially have enough exposure to draw in some names that can actually allow them to maybe, get,
I don't know, man. The last thing I want to see is Wrexham be another yo-yo team. There's too many yo-yo teams as is.
I don't see how they get out of it though. Like it's just such you're in a tough moment, right? Like let's go invest in youth, but we're trying to get promoted. Those two things run in opposition. If you're saying,
I'll say this because Luton Town went from the National League and got to the Premier League on a system that primarily revolved around youth. And when they did bring in guys, they were always on free transfers, guys that had a chip on their shoulder that they basically ingrained into that youth, right? Okay, great. And they were able to do that. My biggest issue is Wrexham going to do what Norwich did, what Sheffield United did, what Burnley did? Was when they get to the championship, knowing that the Premier League, there's $100 million waiting for you in solidarity payments right when you get to the Premier League, right? Are you going to spend $60 million to get that promotion just to get to the Premier League, knowing that you're going to offset that. You're going to offset your costs of getting to there, which means you're going to be what Luton Town and Sheffield. Luton Town unfortunately did it, but are you going to be those teams where when you get to the Premier League, you don't have $100 million to spend on transfers? What you really have is like $40 to $50 million, which is only good enough to get you maybe one, maybe two players, and that means you're automatically guaranteed a relegation. You know what I mean? And it completely just throws a wrench into your transfer budget. What I would like to see is
it's hard to know what their finances are actually like. Because
that's a global team. Wrexham is the global team, right? They have so much sponsor revenue ship coming in.
They have a lot of money coming in, man. And between the show, the sponsorship money, it's not and that's what I'm just interested to know how much they could draw if they actually, right? The Cinderella story with the show is making the Premier League, right?
Correct.
But if we think the level of attention they've gotten up to this point is big, if that is actually what happens the next couple of years, they're going to be rolling in money, not just the money they get right from the Prem, but they're going to be rolling in a lot of other money. And that's what's interesting to me is what is that number? Are they able to do more than what the typical team that gets promoted does because of the scenario, because of the backing they have, plus the promotion, PR, plus, I don't know. Right. It'll be interesting. I really want them to get promoted and see them in the championship because that's big boy. That becomes big boy soccer if they're there.
This is what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to continue down this road where they're going to make sure that they invest wisely to make sure that they can keep on getting promoted, right? So if they get promoted this year and they're in the championship, they'll do the exact same thing to get to the Premier League. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the revenue from all that sponsorship, because they have so much sponsorship money coming in on not just with the show, but what the show has been able to get them as far as other
Right.
multi-million-dollar sponsorships, right?
So,
I think if they get to the Premier League, that's when I think that what they'll end up doing is also investing in their academy. And I think once they get to the Premier League, they'll still continue with that transfer strategy, but also heavily invest in their academy once they get to the Premier League.
Yeah, which would be cool.
Which would be cool. What do you think? What do you think, man? What do you think about this?
I'm excited. I follow him. I do too. I would like to watch. I'm going to try and watch more games here down the stretch. I haven't watched a ton this year, but I always check in on results, and I'm always like, it's just such an interesting story, man. Because I feel like what they've done is what this is what MLS has to capture, right? Is like, how can you tell me a story that gets me invested for years? Because there's a million docs out there. There's a Sunderland doc. Like, it's not like you just do a doc. It was a good doc, but like, I don't follow Sunderland like that. Like, the story they've told at Wrexham has been told in a way that like I actually am invested. Like, as someone with no investment, like 4 years ago, I'm like all in. I'm like, I want to see what happens with this team and these people. And they've told the story in a way that I care about, certain players and certain, people surrounding the club, and the fans and the guy who owns the bar, and and that's what, if you want to invest random people, like, find a way to tell the stories that people will attach to. Don't just give me like a behind the scenes with FC Dallas. Like,
right.
What are the stories in MLS that I'm going to attach to? Who are like the old players who have been here forever? Who's like the new, like, I don't know. Who are the kids? Like, build stories that, make me say, yeah, I really want to watch the Kansas City game this weekend because like I watched this thing on that team and I care about 2 or 3 other guys. It's a good lesson, man. Not just for the MLS, for like, sports at large. Like, tell interesting stories, and you can make people who have no business, you and me, who have no business caring or talking about Wrexham at the end of this, pod, say, hey, what's up with Wrexham? That's like, it's an interesting story.
The best piece of business they ever did was breaking into the American market. After they get promoted, because of the documentary, after they got promoted to League Two, they did a summer tour in the United States. And all of a sudden now, fans in Charlotte, fans in Cincinnati, fans in Chicago, fans in LA got to see Wrexham. They're the only League Two team that ever toured, had a summer tour, and they're doing it every year now. But I agree with you. But I think the biggest problem with Major League Soccer is the fact that, number one, there's no promotion relegation, so there's no story of coming up from.
Hard to tell those stories for sure.
You're not going to be able to do it. But the other thing is the salary cap, because there is no team that's going to get that kind of sponsorship revenue and then spend their way to the top of the league. Because of like that, there's just too many things that hamstring major. But there is a way that you can tell a story. The idea that you can talk about a guy like Paul Mullen who can only get to League One with Carlisle United, and he's, his son is autistic, and he moves to Wrexham because they have the best, autistic, child autistic care center there. You know what I mean? Like, you get emotionally invested into some of these guys. It's not just about football. That's what I loved about it, because it's not just about football. It's about saving a community.
There's enough. Like, I watched that Olympic documentary. I think it was done by the same people who do Full Swing and the F1. And, like, riveting, like, really cool. Like, listen, like, there's no promotion relegation, but like, they told stories about Serbia and France, right? Those teams' journeys going into this World Cup, drastically different stories for both of them, as opposed to Canada and US. Like, 4 very disparate stories, but like told in a way and crafted in a way that I was like all in, and I knew what happened. But like, I was like, man, this is cool to like, get inside the Serbian locker room and hear the pride they have for their country. And, once again, like, what are those stories? Is it, I would prefer not to do Kevin Sullivan at 15, but is it Kevin Sullivan at 17? Is it Diego Luna? Is there an interesting story there about like what his journey's been, right? His childhood. And now I don't know, but like, you got to go do the research, as the, as the league and the people who would make that doc, and like find those stories, like, and then tell them in compelling ways. Sports docs are the hottest thing out right now. Everybody wants a sports doc, and tell it in a way that's vulnerable and that, I'm going to, watch and care. But
by the way, the Christian Pulisic doc, not good. He's not, dude. He's not an entertaining guy. And
agreed.
And I know that U.S. Soccer is bankrolling a documentary to the lead up to the 2026 World Cup. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm interested because it's going to be some propaganda.
That's the problem, right? Yeah, a lot of the docs. That's the problem with a lot of the docs, right? Is like they're player controlled or they're team controlled. Those usually suck. It's like the docs where you're really given full access, and teams are like, tell the stories, man. Like, tell the real story, and like we don't care, Like,
I'll give you a few ideas, and I know that we're about to sign off here. But number one, I want to see a team, the Canadian national team, a documentary with Jesse Marsh, and the inner workings of trying to use the national team as a vessel to get kids in Canada to play soccer, in conjunction with the 2 Major League Soccer teams in Canada. And the other one is a Josh Sargent doc. I know they did one, but a journey to the Premier League for Josh Sargent. That would be awesome. I would watch that. That's all.
Yeah, those would be sick.
I'm a Josh Sargent guy. What can I say?
I love it.
Well,
even like I think a doc independently done about Mexico, Canada, and the US going into 2026, right? Tell all 3 stories, all 3 host nations, 3 totally different soccer histories and spots.
But kind of have it with the rivalry twist. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, are these players actually? Yeah. Do they care about the rivalry?
You tell the underdog Canada story. You tell the, giant who's now on the downswing with Mexico. But once again, you do it. You let the filmmakers do it. You don't step in as U.S. Soccer and go, well, you can't say that, or you can't. It's just like, tell the story, man. You got access, make people interested in it. Do what you guys do best. Good chat, dude.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, by the way, do you think the U.S. players care about the U.S. Mexico rivalry anymore?
I do.
I don't think they do. You do?
Really? I think Pulisic does. I think
I think certain guys definitely do, but
I think it's tough because everybody's, it's a very big time melting pot team. But like, I think the guys who have been in it now since 2021, the 2021 Nations League, I think they feel it. That's Weah, that's Pulisic, that's McKennie, that's Adams, that's Dest, that's
it was something different back in the day, though. It was like there was a lot of hatred. There was a lot of hatred for
listen, like it was Mexico's in a weird spot though, right? Like they went from having that team that I feel like would have been actually pretty hateable to like they're so shifted as well that I think even their players are all kind of trying to figure out what the rivalry means. Yeah. And let's just be honest, we're not playing in World Cup qualifiers, which also just kind of like cools it a little bit. Like it's not the same level of stakes. But we'll see. We'll see in the Nations League final. Like that'll tell a story. What are the Nations League matchups? What are the matchups?
It's Mexico versus Canada, US versus Panama. Yeah. And I kind of want Canada. You want Canada? Because I actually think from a rivalry standpoint, I actually think from a Canada standpoint, it's going like with everything that's going on with tariffs and all that good stuff. I think from a Canada standpoint, those dudes are going to be hungry. Those guys they're going to have the entire country behind them. You know what I mean?
After that hockey game, yeah.
Oh, dude. All right.
They also beat us in September too, right? So it's like, Canada. Yeah, bring on Canada. That'll be a fun one. I'm in.
Well, that's going to do it. Adam, I want to thank you for stopping by, man. This has been awesome. It's always good to have you on, man. We'll do it. Yeah, we'll do it a little bit down the road, maybe after the Nations League. We'll do a recap. Cool. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like and subscribe, man. Have a good night.